Throughout American history, Asian Americans have experienced numerous amounts of hate and discrimination. In this video, we will discuss some of the bigger events and court cases that have happened since the beginning of the United States. The Naturalization Act of 1790 was the first significant example of Asian American discrimination in the U.S. This act established that free white persons with good moral character could be granted citizenship, but for all others, including Asian Americans, it was barred. In the late 1800s, a surge of Asian American immigration occurred, and these people faced large-scale discrimination and hate. Many were denied jobs they could have been well qualified for, but because of their race, were disallowed. Also, the Anti-Coolie Act of 1862 required a heavy tax on all Asian Americans that tried to work in manufacturing. This act limited competition for majority/white jobs. These events were why the majority of transcontinental railroad workers were of Asian descent. These acts also encouraged Asian American hate as shown in the Chinese massacre in LA in 1871. During the time of the Industrial Revolution, many Asian immigrants came to America looking for a better life. Because of this, there was a lot of destruction and massacre towards the Asian Americans. This led to President Chester A. Arthur signing the Chinese Exclusion Act, where it banned Asians from work and immigration due to their race. Ultimately, this led to Asians being the first illegal and undocumented immigrants in U.S. history. This court case established whether the states or the federal government had power over immigration. In the case, 22 Asian American women immigrated to the U.S. and were detained by the state of California for suspicion of being prostitutes. In the case, it was established that the state of California did not have the power to determine the woman's immigration status. Although this court case didn't stop Asian American hate, it did allow for more Asians to immigrate to the U.S. and gave more freedoms to Asian Americans that have recently immigrated to the U.S. In this case, 2 Asian American women who owned a laundry business in San Francisco were fined and then imprisoned for running their business without a permit. Recently, a law had been made that a government board had to give out permits for laundries to operate, and this board had refused to give out permits to anyone of Asian descent. The women continued to run their laundry, and when fined, they refused to pay. This resulted in imprisonment, and the case was brought to court. In court, it was established that while the law requiring permits was fine, the board could not discriminate in who they gave the permits to. It violated the Equal Protection Clause and the 14th Amendment. This case helped push the government away from Asian American discrimination, especially in the workforce.
Wong was an American-born Asian American, but did not have citizenship because of the Chinese Exclusion Act. At age 21, he went to China to visit family, and when he returned, he was denied entry because he was not a citizen. In court, it was established that because he was born in America and his parents were not employed by the Chinese government, he was a U.S. citizen. This act imposed greater discrimination and immigration difficulty on Asian Americans. It required literacy tests for anyone older than 16, increased tax on new immigrants, and gave immigration workers more discretion on who to let in or exclude. During World War II, the country Japan announced their alliance with Germany and Italy. The U.S. was then attacked on Pearl Harbor, and Americans feared Japanese Americans and suspected them of being spies or Axis sympathizers. This led to discrimination, mistrust, and eventually internment by the U.S. government. The constitutionality of these internment camps has been questioned throughout history. Did the U.S. government have the power and cause to intern all Japanese Americans because of their heritage? This case covered the question of can someone who is not eligible for citizenship own land. In this case, a non-citizen Asian American, Oyama, owned 6 acres but was forced to move away from California due to World War II. Later, his son, who was a U.S. citizen, tried to return and reclaim his father's land but was disallowed by the government, saying that Oyamas had tried to evade the Alien Land Act. The state had taken possession of the land, but this was declared unconstitutional in court due to the 14th Amendment. The Korean and Vietnam Wars were both proxy wars that the U.S. was involved in against communism. These wars were not very popular with the American people and caused a lot of upheaval both in the countries at war and on American soil. The U.S. did not end up winning either war, but it resulted in more social distress. Just like in World War II, this anger was sometimes directed towards those of Korean, Vietnamese, or even just Asian descent.
In 1971, the San Francisco, California school system was integrated. As a result, the San Francisco school system absorbed over 2,856 students of Chinese ancestry who were not proficient in English. Of these students, the school system only provided about 1,000 with supplemental English language courses. Classes were taught exclusively in English. The students claimed that the failure to provide supplemental English classes constituted an unequal educational opportunity in violation of the 14th Amendment and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. After a unanimous vote, the court determined that it was a violation of Section 601 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a lot of anger and confusion, and no one really knew who to blame at first. When it was first discovered that the origins of the virus was from Wuhan, China, Asians began to experience a lot of racial hate due to people blaming them for being the cause of the virus and widespread panic. During this time, the Stop Asian Hate movement took popularity in a lot of major cities in the U.S.